work. When you come on, you'll all be on mute. Because today is a panel conversation, I'm very keen, obviously, that we can ask questions to the panel. A number of you have been kind enough to send questions in before today's call, but equally too, if you have a question during the course of the call, at the bottom of your screen, please use the chat box, and then I will obviously look at those as we go along. Okay, so it's been, I guess, a pretty interesting fortnight since we last met. Offices are slowly reopening, and many of you have plans to return to your office. Equally, as many of you, as of yet, have decided actually you're safer at home and you're more comfortable at home. And some of you actually have spoken to me about the fact that you're thinking about changing the ways in which you operate entirely. Some children have returned to school. A number of mums and dads on the calls today have taken their kids back to school yesterday in tears and had them run into the school today, which I guess demonstrates the fact that they're happy to be back. And also, obviously, we've witnessed the fact that the government have been sort of taking the restraints off lockdown, and people are now beginning to meet again, friends and family, social distancing continuing, and obviously the elderly are also being encouraged to step out. Take ourselves back to February the 22nd, when the Daily Mirror and the Guardian jointly broke the story that I guess to some extent has dominated the British news media for the last 2 weeks. Many might argue that regardless of where you stand on the Dominic Cummings affair, what it has served to further demonstrate is how you undermine the government's messaging and communications plan. And it's certainly added more murk around an already confused public. I guess it demonstrates as marketeers that we are all in a world where external events can determine the success or otherwise of our strategies and our campaigns, be it COVID, Brexit, or the terrible events that took place in the US at the weekend. Events shape brands, and social media, camera phones, and news 24/7 impact how society sees us and the brands that we work for. And brands now feel that they need to basically speak out when human justice is undermined. Witness the approach this week from Nike, from Apple, Target, and many more in the last few days. I guess another infuriating death of a black man at the hands of a police officer has sparked mass protests around the USA and in this country, initiated by civil rights groups for racial equality. In fact, the very thing that we'd forecast, I guess, right at the start of this lockdown of disturbance has been kicked off by one brutal act. Let's hope this doesn't escalate as Trump sends in the troop. Which really kind of brings me to the point, and the point is that I guess a real frustration that I think is underpinning all of this unrest is a complete and lack of effective leadership. And it's not a pop at Boris or, for that matter, Trump. These are long-term systemic issues, whether it's crippling problems with the NHS, educational standards, climate change, income inequality, or racial inequality. I've yet to witness, at least in my adult life, a government that's actually been able to resolve or change in these issues. Now, against that backdrop, and against where we are with COVID, we all have businesses to run. And I'm really pleased today that we've been able to put together a really exciting panel of professionals to talk about the ever-changing face and landscape, if you like, of business development. We have 3 Pimento consultancies that are expert in this particular field joining us today. And I've also invited a couple of senior agency members from Push and CDS to join us, so we get a balanced perspective between what the professionals in the consultancy world are saying about new business and what one should be doing now, and a kind of understanding as to actually what agencies are doing themselves. So with approaching 50 people on the call, what I'm going to do now is very briefly introduce our panel. And if you've got questions, as I say, please do take the opportunity to let me have them at the bottom of the page. I'll start with our first consultancy on the call today, and depending on where he is on your screen, he should be top right-hand screen. Adam Graham there from Grey Matters. Grey Matters is a strategic business development agency for agencies whose mission is to change the perception of sales in our industry and help people love new business. He mentors and empowers agencies to attract and win new clients via several programs that he's been following a proven and tested methodology. Their programs range from training to full consultancy, tailored for one-off agencies to 100-man independent agencies. Adam, their founder, is a creative, commercially focused new business and marketing specialist driven by a desire to help agencies stand out and grow their businesses into building reputable brands. And he's honed his craft over the last 15 years, having worked for some of the biggest agencies in-house at Rap, Vizium, Isobar, as well as Omnicom and Dentsu. So he has a lot of big agency experience as well as independent experience. Cherry is our other new business consultancy. We're joined today by Lucy, and together with Katie, they're the founders and joint managing directors of Cherry, which was founded in 2004. Lucy has worked in the creative sector for nearly 20 years, starting in the agency sector and the creative side, working in the recruitment business and helping to develop agencies and then moving into new business. For the last 2 years, Lucy has been listed in the BD 100 as one of the UK's most influential business development people. She's in the top left-hand side of your picture there. Give us a wave, Lucy. Brilliant. Katie Street is the founder of Street, a boutique new business agency built for agencies to help them attract and win more work. With her 20 years experience leading marketing and new business strategies for both agencies and brands, she's very well placed and balanced to help agencies cut through amidst and become distinctive. She's been working with agencies through the pandemic and running a series of very successful webinars. Her current clients include large agencies like Tribal, which is part of the Omnicom Group, and a number of independent agencies, including some of the people on this call. And she's also been awarded by Beamer in the top 100 of and Brand Republic for her marketing and business efforts for agencies over the past few years. So we've got some very smart, some very well experienced individuals to help you today. Push, where are we, sir? Hey, Steve, welcome. Push is a global digital marketing agency. Steve Hyde, their founder and CEO, has spent 25 years in marketing. His early career was in mainly American FMCG corporates like Kraft, PepsiCo, and Disney, where I'm sure we met because we crossed over there. Ultimately, like myself, he got frustrated with the rather slow pace of working for large corporations, and in 2004 set up and created in 2007 his own agency, Push. His overall vision of the future and the ability to simplify complex topics helps businesses make sense of the digital landscape, simplifying, making clients aware of how they can drive their business performance. Steve's team at Push have helped hundreds of businesses flourish through smarter use of Google Ads, Facebook, and Microsoft advertising. And they've won more Google awards than any other European agency. They've been crowned as Google's best performer for customer satisfaction, mobile innovation, and growing business online. So real sort of digital expert. And whereas Pad, give us a wave. There you are, sir. Pad's actually, he was just telling me now, he's actually on his honeymoon and he's joined us. That just shows how committed he is to new business. I'm impressed. I'm very impressed. CDS is a communication agency, one of the larger members of the Pimento network, £35 million turnover, 170 experts. Their purpose is to simplify the complex marketing challenges clients face across digital, print, insight, and content. And Pad Burns is a tech enthusiast, passionate networker, subpar sportsman, and he also just happens to be their new business manager. So welcome to all of you, and thank you for joining us today. I also noticed that Ralph is down here again, who will be drawing today's experience and sharing that with everyone afterwards. So I'm going to start, but I also witnessed the fact that a lot of you sent in questions, so it'd be really helpful if you would like to ask your question yourself, then please do so. Just raise your hand, and I will come to you, or take yourself off mute and interject. Clearly, you know, we're at a time where, as I say, both client organisations and agencies are beginning to creep back into the workplace and popping their heads above the parapet and recognising they still have a business and they're still keen to develop that business. And I imagine that actually the approach that we need to adopt in these times is significantly different, perhaps, than it was when we weren't all locked down, as it were. So the first question, which I'm going to fire at Lucy, if that's okay, is what have you been preaching and talking to your agencies about? What sort of new approaches have you suggested they might adopt during this period?
Thanks, Stephen. I don't know whether we've actually suggested any new approaches. We've just been reminding agencies kind of what they should have been doing all along, which is to really lead with value. It's not really about selling agency services, but about working out how you can actually help clients and help potential clients. Some of the approaches that we've been doing with particularly one of my clients, who is a branding design agency, has been to craft really, we've done two different approaches. One has been to craft really bespoke emails where we actually look at the brand and see what they should be doing or could be doing better, and we're kind of quite confident in that approach, and that's worked really well actually. And then the other thing that I've seen that's worked well is just offering, we kind of created a package which was offering a free kind of mini workshop, and that's had some good uptake as well. But it really kind of needs to lead with offering value, offering help and support, not being spammy, and making sure your messages are as personalized as possible. If you want to do a bigger broadcast campaign, then ideally you need it to kind of be to promote maybe a webinar or some thought leadership content or something that's going to add to their kind of what they've got, their existing insight that they've got.
Okay, thank you. Adam, I mean, as a build on that, are you seeing the nature of the messaging evolving? Are clients looking for different sorts of things from agencies at the moment?
Yeah, I think that depends on the client, to be honest. I think I think the sensitivity around sales is the biggest thing that's changed in this current landscape, that people have to be even more empathetic than they were before, just to to know that when you're, I think when you're reaching out to somebody, you never quite know the circumstances that person is in. And I think we have to look at every extreme in that, relatives having just passed away, jobs having just been made redundant, staff having to put on furlough. Like, we just don't know who's on the other end of a call or an email. And that's true at any time. And I think so often we go into sales messaging and we're so gung-ho thinking about our great products and our great offering and how much we want to get it across the line. We don't empathize at the best of times. And I think now's the time to really sort of just be ever more mindful of who might be receiving that message. So I think that's something that, as I say, the sensitivity around it that has changed. But like Lucy said, I think a lot of the mechanics in terms of how we are advising agencies to do new business haven't changed that dramatically. I just think it's the content that's gone out that's had to change, and how we've had to, depending on, and like obviously different sectors as well have been obviously massively impacted in different ways. So depending on what your service offering is, if you're a digital transformation agency that works with, social media platforms, you're probably absolutely flying, and you don't have to worry. If anything, there's just opportunity there for you. But if you're a travel agency in the PR space, then suddenly your world is completely turned upside down. And so it's not a one size fits all approach. And I think, as long as we, as Lucy said, we'd be mindful and we're helpful and we're thinking about what those brands could be doing. And it might not be, as I said, it might not be about selling in this time, as in selling for the agency and selling for the client. It's about staying top of mind. So although you can't offer your travel PR services, you can still be helpful, relevant, stay top of mind with those people. And likewise, they can still do things that help their clients and keep them top of mind and them relevant and them helpful. We might not generate sales out of that, but you have to accept that that's the market that you're in. And actually, when things do return or when business picks up, who they're going to think of, the guys who went dead quiet and never contacted them, or the guys that were there through thick and thin. So that's the kind of mentality we're seeing.
Katie, thank you, Alan. Katie, let me just take you off mute there. There you are. Oop. There you go. Oh, hang on, nearly unmuted. I think we're probably both. There you go. Have you seen some sort of real case histories of that and examples of that over this period, where agencies have either got it absolutely right in terms of messaging or got it horribly wrong?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is the agencies that are probably riding this storm better than others are the ones that had a good share of voice beforehand. So if you had been working on your marketing outreach and putting helpful content out into the market already, then you're often more front of mind than other agencies would be, and as I'm sure all of you guys, as agency owners or founders or heads of marketing or new business have been advising your brand clients. I think having a strong share of voice in the market, brands and agencies that have already been doing that are going to be one step ahead. The one thing that I have really been advising all of our clients to do, and we have been doing, is one, to keep that up. But before you do that, before you start pushing your messaging out to the market, really start to understand your customers' new needs, because just like Adam was saying, the likelihood is that the brands that they're talking to, certainly if they're in a sector that has been quite badly affected by this, their customers or their potential customers' needs have potentially changed. So it's really worth revisiting what your customers' needs might be, how things have changed for them, so that you can then tweak your value proposition and your own brand messaging in line with that. Because just pushing out the same messaging that you were pushing out before is not going to work. We have had to change our marketing strategies and plans for every single agency that we work for, and we did that really, really early on because I guess a little bit of instinct. I knew that this wasn't going to go away anytime soon. So it has meant a huge, we're just about getting to a place now where we're not crazy busy, and hopefully I'm not going to go too grey, especially as I can't get to hairdressers at the moment. I think we're just getting to a place where things are starting to stabilise, but we have been incredibly busy because we've not been totally revisiting the value proposition, but looking at, does the value proposition work in the new normal, in the new world that we're heading into? Have the customers' needs changed, and how do we need to change our marketing messaging and our tactics in line with that, to make sure that we are helpful and that we're communicating with our potential customers in the right way, really.
Thank you. And Steve, I've come to you, mate, being on sort of the agency side. Again, have you had to adapt a new approach in terms of how you go about trying to drive new business, or is it just coming in through the door through reputation?
I think we certainly have adapted. One thing I would say is that about a decade ago, we switched into presenting to new clients using a tool which was then called Join Me. So we were presenting to prospective clients. So in that respect, we've been engaging with new prospects for some time, using online, using video conferencing, sharing screens, using tools like Share Me, Join Me, SlideShare. So and the one thing that we found when we used those originally was that the big driver of people that went up, that tipped over the line to become customers was urgency, and in that respect, often going to meet people. Sometimes our closing rates from meeting people in person were lower generally than they were from online presentations. So I just encourage everyone to think about that actually it can work to your advantage, particularly if you do adapt. The ways I'd adapt those presentations, you've got to keep, if you're talking to a prospective client or even an existing customer, you need to make the presentation as visual as possible. So whether you're using Google Slides or PowerPoint, keep it visual, keep it short. And then the other thing to remember is to interact with people. So you're not just hitting them with a SlideShare deck all the time. You actually need to disengage from the deck or the presentation sometimes and talk to them like we're talking now. But we've certainly had to change a lot, but it's on the background of having already been doing a lot of online presentations. So perhaps we've had to change less than others in that respect.
Thank you. Pat, again, as a build on that, in many respects, you're in a good place, along with Bush, in terms of you're in the space where clients are having to rapidly digitize their businesses, having to make changes to the way in which they communicate and sell. Some of them were partially there already. Many others have actually had to start again. What are you seeing in terms of demand and how are you approaching the market?
Yeah, absolutely. As you say, I think from a personal perspective, I had sort of 4 or 5 projects that were coming towards a head just before we went into lockdown, and all of them were postponed indefinitely. So it's about, and sort of looking at the fact that, excuse my French, but shit happens, and being resilient to this, to this as a new business salesperson is absolutely key. But reverting to Adam's point, is that empathy is absolutely vital in this instance, and staying close to those prospects that have potentially been moved down the line, and understanding that, you know, it's something that's out of their hands in that respect. But the thing that I found the most useful, it was from a webinar that I was on probably going back 10 weeks ago, shortly after we came into lockdown, which was that, you know, no one wants to be sold to at the best of times, right? So to be trying to sell your value to somebody, when, especially at this point in time, is not the right way to do it. So it's changing your approach, changing that tone of voice. And the thing that I found most useful is just, be it on LinkedIn or on an email or however you're looking to do it, is reaching out to those people that you're looking to speak to and just asking them for a chat, not looking for any sort of agenda on the call, but looking to introduce yourself and learn more about what they do. And I've found that people have been really, really receptive to that. And it's funny how open people can be with you when there is no agenda, when you're genuinely not looking to sell anything to them, but it's again, reverting back to what Adam said, it's making sure that you're going to be at the forefront of their mind when something does come up and there is an opportunity, and they look to think about who they're looking to work with. So I found that really useful.
Okay, so I mean, to summarise, basically the feedback there is that actually empathy always in sales situations is particularly important, and really understanding the needs of that client. I guess the challenge we've had in the last 12 weeks is really understanding what the needs of those clients are, because they've all had different challenges in their businesses. As you say, in the travel business has been particularly hard hit. Seen that across all travel specialists and how they suffered, as well as our travel clients. Yet it's very difficult to anticipate when they're going to be in a position to start to resell, and it's also very difficult to actually anticipate without that contact what they need to do now in order to prepare for that eventuality. And sometimes, obviously, and in the case of a couple of clients, they've actually had to unload their entire marketing department. We've got one cruise client that's basically got shot of all of their marketing department, closed it down, which begs the question, what are they going to do when they are in a position to start to market and resell cruises? I'm going to move on, if I may, then, from COVID for a second. We'll probably come back to it anyway, because obviously it's a theme that's going to run for a long period of time. But I guess one of the reasons that so many of your members of the Pimento Network is because you're all independent agencies and you're all running your own businesses. And one of the things that we've been talking about in the last few weeks is how can independent agencies compete with the groups? Now, Adam, I'm going to come to you first, because you've worked for the groups. Most of your clients now, I imagine, are actually outside of the big groups. You're working with lots of independents. What do you say to the independents when you're pitching what they should be doing? And how does that change when you're talking to the groups?
Yeah, well, I think we've seen, even in the last, 5 years, so, COVID aside, we've seen a real rise in independent agencies. And I think that's thanks to technology and being able to work more remotely, and just people sort of, the entry to market in terms of setting up an agency is quite low. So there's lots of consultants and independents setting up, and that's been a trend we've noticed over the last five years. So I think, the big networks have also in that time been hit really hard. We've seen the likes of WPP, we've seen the share prices fall. iProspect, for one, is part of the Dentsu Aegis network. I used to do a lot of work for them. They've made a huge number of staff redundant. The bigger you are, the harder you fall, unfortunately, in times like this. And I guess one of the things that does is put a big amount of quality into the market. So there's a bigger pool of resources that smaller agencies could possibly seize upon. There's also the threat that some of those consultants or employees might go and set up their own agencies. So you might even see more independent set up. As we know, it's not an easy market, so just because you're a PPC or SEO specialist doesn't mean you can run a business and run an agency. There are lots of other skills required in doing that and being successful. But I think I think the bigger networks are struggling. You see, the growth of, look at the Pimento network and other independent network specialists. You see the likes of Oliver Group and, different collectives like the Hoxby Collective London. There's so many of these businesses and, models. I don't need to tell you, Stephen, I'm sure you're more aware of this, in terms of how the market is shifting. So I think it's definitely an opportunity. It's not a reason to be, I often think small agencies get in the mindset, well, I'm small, I think small, and therefore you win small. I think there's a bravery and there's a stepping up that needs to be done by all small independent agencies. There aren't the barriers that there were before, and I think they need to lean on the fact that they can offer a more personable approach and a more valued approach to their customers. And I think that's going to continue. I think the big agencies are really struggling with the agility, with the different specialisms that they can't sort of take hold of at this time. So it's an opportunity, but I do see it becoming noisier, basically.
And Lucy, as a corollary to that, I guess, with an oversupplied market, I think there's like 17,500 agencies, consultancies in the UK. I agree with Adam. I think that's likely to grow as we see the breakup of some of the groups, and also, let's be honest about it, there's going to be a significant number of redundancies within those groups, which will probably spur the next generation of smaller agencies. How do you create differentiation in such an oversupplied market? What do you say to your agencies about actually creating that point of separation when then so many of them are trading on the same marketing disciplines? So that's to you, Lucy. Sorry. She's frozen, I think. Have we lost her? We may have lost her for a second. Hey, I'm going to address that question to you, if I may. So it's about differentiation and how one actually creates it in a very crowded market.
Yeah, I mean, I actually think this is and there was actually research that started to show this prior to the COVID-19 outbreak. So obviously I do quite a lot of research when we're helping agencies define their value proposition. There's actually a lot of research out there already prior to this that clients more often than not want independent agencies now because they're more agile, they're quicker to deliver things, they care more. So I think that if you think about and I haven't done a huge amount of research yet, although I am conducting some at the moment, but if you think about customers' needs now, more than ever, I think there's the stats a few weeks ago showed that 49% of brands and large corporations have either had to launch a new service or a new product to, make themselves as a brand relevant to the new market. So their need is going to be, we need to get this to market quickly. We either need to, some help developing whatever it is that we're developing, and or at some point we're going to need some help taking it to market in some way, whether that's via PR, via a website, a new e-commerce solution, via marketing strategies. So I really think independent agencies are better placed than ever to communicate to these brands to say, we are the people that can help you get there faster, quicker, we care more. We're not, I don't want to, say that the big networked agencies can't do that, because there are, often smaller agencies within those networks can act in exactly the same way. But I'm mapping back to exactly what I said before. Think about what your audience need and map your messaging to that, because really more than ever, I think clients could adopt and work with independent agencies more. In fact, I had the VP of International Marketing from Hertz talking on our webinar yesterday. Unfortunately, he has just left Hertz, but because Hertz, I think, are about to make everyone redundant and have to almost kind of start from ground zero again, although they won't go missing completely. Obviously they have been hugely affected by this, but he's had this startup that he wanted to do anyway, so he's about to do that. But he was saying exactly that. He wants to work with more agile, smaller agencies. They've just gone on a journey, and obviously anyone who reads the press will have seen the big hoo-ha between them and Accenture a few years ago, and had got Oliver in because Oliver worked completely differently and went in, integrated themselves with their teams, removed a lot of the kind of old school client agency horrible things that can often happen, and I think the way that they worked together was much more effective for him. So I think most brands and heads of marketing, they want help, they want and need help and advice quicker and faster than ever right now. So I really believe that independent agencies have got a real chance to, to help them, probably more than usual.
Okay. This question, I guess, is to all of you, and I don't mind who grabs it. Chris Westlake has also raised a similar question, and that is, excepting the fact that we have got, obviously, a growing and burgeoning number of suppliers within the independent sector, I still don't think the independent sector actually punches above its own weight, and I think it struggles against the groups insofar as getting through in the media. We know, Campaign has its pet agencies. Another great demonstration of it in the last week or so with the launch of Murphy's new agency. And we also obviously witness all the time that the intermediaries, again, tend to be much more comfortable working with the groups and have long established relationships with them, as does the Advertising Association. So it does make it difficult for independent agencies to get noticed and to get cut through. So to any of you, really, what do you think as independent agency owners that could be done to try and address that issue in the near term? What strategies are you employing to be able to compete with larger agency groups? We'll start with...
Yeah, I mean, I think that might be the case. Oh, sorry, Katie.
Okay, Lucy, go first. Lucy, go first, because we lost you for a second. You froze.
I know, you were just about to ask the question and then I got cut out. But I think that it depends on what discipline you're in. I think clearly for advertising, intermediaries play a very important role. And so they, I think they do tend to favour group agencies. But if you are an agency that's going to rely on or want to rely on intermediaries, then you need to really invest in the time to kind of court them. You need to almost treat them as a prospect in themselves. Often I think agencies feel that, or think that maybe they pay their membership fee depending on which different intermediary it is, and think that the work intermediary is updated on any work that you've done. You need to share with them relevant content and thought leadership pieces. You need to keep your profile up to date, and really, maximize that relationship as much as you can. And then in terms of PR, I think that, agencies, yes, they love to be in campaign, but actually, where is your target audience and what publications are they reading? It's much more about trying to get into maybe Courier magazine. Obviously that's quite hard in itself, and Fastco or other more interesting publications, or if you're a travel specialist or hotelier, legal specialist, then some of those more niche publications rather than the trade press, which is actually only really read by agencies. I'm not really sure many big brand directors and marketing directors read those.
Steve, did you come up against the big agencies often on pitches?
We have done, and I think generally, I'd endorse the points made by Katie and Lucy. I think, especially about campaign, which I think is terribly outdated. But we've come across the bigger agencies in pitches, and where we've won, it's back to that point that Katie made about, it's about speed. It's about being able to show that in this marketplace that is moving incredibly fast, and the big agencies cannot keep up. They are behind. Even their specialist departments are behind. So I think it's probably enough sometimes to be able to win the pitch based on likability, trustability, relationships, but the speed thing's a huge angle for people, because you can demonstrate and you can articulate why speed matters in this marketplace, and why adopting new approaches, new techniques, testing, why it's important. To that extent, I'd say that for us, where we thrive on speed, we sometimes move away or shy away from working with some of the bigger ticket clients, because we know that their own organizations are too slow for the way that we work. So there's something around speed. I'd pick up on the point about campaign as well, which I think I'm not, I'm not sure that that's as Lucy mentioned, that I think it's read by agencies, but I don't think that's the way of getting through to the big brands that I would adopt. There's another approach. Not quite sure what it is, but it's not a load of content in campaign.
Yeah, I mean, I agree there. And interestingly enough, as a build on one of your points there, Annabelle Dunstan and also Mike Cutlass have just made the point that, you know, people buy people. It's the quality of your counsel and depth of trust you have that can compete better with any group agency. Mike Cutlass goes on to say, I agree, Annabelle, investment in relationships at all levels of the client side pays off. Big agencies tend to focus on senior relationships and forget the day-to-day. I do think, and I've witnessed this, you know, having spoken to so many agencies on the last 16 years on a daily basis and on a weekly basis, get introduced to lots of new agencies. One of the things I think is really apparent is that we've been single discipline for quite a long period of time through fragmentation, and that some of the kind of craft skills, and dare I say it, the account handling skills, aren't always apparent. And actually, independent agencies, in many respects, actually should be better at doing that, at managing clients. And there's been a lack of investment in training, I think, in actually teaching people and training people to be able to actually think about a client's business problem and understand actually how different aspects of the marketing mix contribute to helping them solve that problem. It tends to come at it from a particular point of view. I've got an agenda to sell something here because I'm a specialist in this area. I do think independent agencies need to perhaps can do better in that space and actually can use it as a way to differentiate themselves from what is offered by the groups. Okay, that's just my opinion. I'm happy to be challenged on that.
No, Stephen, could I just jump in? One other thing I wanted to mention, because you asked about differentiation and things like that, and I think one of the agencies, a big debate in our industry is around niching and how you sort of differentiate your agency. And I think a lot of that, I think, is an independent agency and as an industry, we have a long way to go in that world. And I think there's a lot of fear when it comes down to niching because people are really scared and worried about cutting off their market. And I often say, I look at it like an inverted pyramid, kind of, you know, that hourglass shape where you focus down in on something, actually the opportunity widens. But often agency owners are too scared to let themselves get to that point of inflection, so they don't ever see that opportunity. And the other thing that really limits this is that when I say the word niching, everybody's mind on this call goes to sector, right? Everyone thinks, well, I don't want to focus on a sector. That limits me, right? And I have this debate with hundreds of agencies when I talk about niching, and all they can think about is sector. And I think I'd really challenge us all to think about how we define our audiences in lots of different ways, both on terms of the businesses that we market to and the people within those businesses, and tapping into mindsets, tapping into cultures, philosophies, you know, where they are in their markets. You know, there are so many ways to segment audiences, yet nobody does it. They only think about sector, or they only think about service. And sector and service are two ways that you could differentiate. And I'm not saying you can't do it that way. I just think there's a lot more around the types of companies, the mindset they might be in, their philosophies, their cultures that we can appeal to, which will hopefully get across kind of a bit more about us and the type of work we do and what we're like to work with, and then appeal and attract the types of people that we want to work with. Does that make sense? It
does make sense. And actually, I wouldn't mind bringing Jonathan Sands, who's the owner of Elmwood, in on that piece. I mean, about differentiation. Jonathan, do you want to just talk a little bit about Jerry, and also about how you go about differentiating your proposition?
I don't think I've got half a day, have I?
No, you've got a minute and a half.
I think it's something that every agency, I think, wrestles with. And I just put the quote on the chat channel, but many years ago I was reading a business book by Warren Bennis, and it's called Organizing Genius, and it's the story of 7 world-beating organizations or world-beating teams. And it's a great book. It's got the story of Apple in there, story of Disney, story of Bill Clinton's campaign, I think. But in the foreword, there's a great quote by Jerry Garcia, and I wouldn't know a Grateful Dead song now if you played one, but he did say something really profound, which has always stuck with me, to the point where we have a picture of him in every studio, which we paid the royalty for. And he said, it's no longer good enough to be the best of the best. You have to be the only ones who do what you do. And it really stuck with me, because if you're the best of the best, you're competing on a known level playing field. Your benchmarks are the same benchmarks as everybody else. And yes, your brand can be faster, last longer, have more widgets, whatever it might be. But if you're the only ones who do what you do, then that's something that's sustainable. And we like to think that we've got a couple of USPs. You know, we've spent a lot of time working with neuroscientists to understand how neuroscience reacts with creative, and that's been a real difference driver. We invested a huge amount of money with a company in LA to train us all in genuine agile methodologies of working. So people talk about being agile, but actually we've spent a lot of money really trying to be agile. And those are all great, but I'm expecting that every other agency will, not every other agency, but many agencies will copy things that we've done, as we've copied things that other people do. But fundamentally, to be the only ones who do what you do is nearly always a personality. It's nearly always about your style. And you're not going to get every client to like you. And so don't try. You know, just be yourself and amplify your personality. And you'll find that those clients that really engage with you become clients for life. And they become your best salespeople, because they then advocate you to others. And it's really, for me, it's really that simple. Easier said than done.
Can I just jump in on that, Jonathan, in terms of asking you a question? How do you find yourself? Because I think that's what people struggle with. They don't know themselves, therefore they don't know who they want to appeal. So they don't go on that journey. How did you discover who you were and what your business was about?
Well, I'm old, grey and ugly, so I've learned through the school of hard knocks.
So there we go.
I mean, I think that, you know, that's the issue, is that if I look back on my earlier years in my career, I cringe at some of the things that we did, and certainly some of the things that I did. There's one that haunts me, which was my first proper speaking opportunity, and it was called Attitude in a Bath Hat, and I got on stage in a bath hat and a dressing gown, and as soon as I did it, I thought all about, you know, no content, no substance to my talk. I was trying to make a point, and I absolutely died. And so I think you learn about who you are and what sticks and what resonates through the school of hard knocks. And I think I know who I am now, and I know what people don't like about me, and I also know what people do like, and I try and amplify the latter, which is being a bit self-deprecating and, you know, all of those things that we all want to be, but I think it just comes through experience. Unfortunately, it's taken me too long to work it all out.
Oh, you don't look a day of 25, mate. What I would like to do now, I'm going to have a bit of fun now. Can you unmute yourself, Phil? Mr. Lancaster, I'm trying to unmute you. It won't do it, so I'll need you to do it for me. Right. So for those that don't know Phil, Phil's just come from the dark side. He's left the WPP empire and has chosen to go into consulting, and brings 25 years experience working in large multinational agencies running global pieces of business. So he's got some insights, I guess, into how large multinational agencies sell themselves and how they're trying to sell themselves at the moment. Katie, if you were trying to sell a large multinational agency at the moment to a prospective client, what would be your main arguments? What would be the things that you would use, and how would that differ from an independent agency?
Do you know what? I don't know that I would give any different advice to a large multinational than I would to to a small independent. It's very much, you know, dependent on what their own USPs are. And, you know, I think going back to just very quickly what Jonathan was saying about himself, but you need to do the same with your agency. You need to ask your clients, why did they buy you? Why do they actually value you while you now work with them? Speak to, you know, look at what's happening in the marketplace. What are the trends? What are the, if you don't do that, then you won't be honest about how you really. And actually, I often find when I do this for clients that the feedback they get from their clients is often quite different. So I don't actually think it would be different, regardless of whether they're a, you know, part of a big networked agency or a smaller one. And just very quickly, sorry, I was going to mention this earlier, but I didn't get around to it, and I've just got one of the girls that work for me to send me a list. But just to kind of give you the confidence that you can do this, we do work for big networked agencies, but we work for startups and ones that are so tiny that you've never heard of. And we engage through a campaign we ran for them just before lockdown, actually, in February. We attracted people like head of digital for LG Electronics, director of PR for Smart Energy, the CEO of GiftGaff, the director of enterprise transformation from BT, executive vice president of PlayStation, chief exec of Red Cross. The list goes on.
I hope everyone's taking these down.
But no one knew who they were. No, none of these people knew who this agency were. They'd never heard of them before. So it was about us having a really strong message to market that helped them, and also having, you know, we actually put an event on for this client. So we had some really great speakers, and we were helping. It was all about disruption and how brands need. But if you understand what your market needs and you can go to them with the right message, you don't need campaign. You don't need. I mean, look, PR is great. I'm not downing PR. I work with a lot of PR agencies on our strategies, but it's not going to get you leads and conversations anywhere near as quickly as, you know, getting your messaging right and developing your own strategies, your own tactics, your own outreach, I guess. So yeah, regardless of big or small, that would be my advice, I guess.
What's your thoughts?
Did you say me, Steve?
Yes. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, running big business for a long time, as you pointed out. I think the area that I was most terrified about, you know, as an incursion on my business with those large clients was not Omnicom or Publicis or IPG. It was the independent sector. And, you know, for all the reasons that have been cited on the call, particularly about the agility and the counterintuitive, you know, thoughts about not niche, but, you know, going a little deeper, a little more interesting. I think they were the ones that were truly disruptive. But the reason that we held business for so long and pushed away much more talented, smaller agencies and very good people is because we held very strong relationships in the C-suite. And I see this phrase thrown around everywhere these days, the C-suite, you know, and really agencies are probably thinking about a CMO, maybe a category director. And it's very old style and it's too narrow-minded. The C-suite, as far as I was concerned, was everybody in every market that led the business for the client. It was, you know, head of corporate affairs. It was the CEO, CMO. It was the CFO. You know, and we spent hours with a very disciplined contact strategy, personally reaching out in any form that we could to those individuals, as well as what we called the emerging stars by key geographies and key functions, so that we worked that room assiduously, week in, week out, month in, month out. And that was our kind of like our Praetorian Guard protecting our business. It was the relationships, I think Annabelle put it beautifully earlier in her, you know, comment on the chat, which is that we built deep, trusted relationships with those people who basically held the budgets, you know? And so you can't move too far away from the money and the responsibility, no matter how provocative and unique your proposition is as someone who wishes to enter the roster. But if you can find a direction in through an individual that isn't classically cited by the other agency competitors as C-suite, you stand a great deal more chance to have disrupted people like myself when I ran those businesses. So I think Jonathan mentioned it a moment ago, pretty much every senior client I've ever worked with, I can probably consider as a friend and colleague now, because we spent so much time together, working together, and making all those hideous mistakes as well, that I also made, Jonathan, and I'm sure I could match you easily. But I'm delighted. I have to say, I'm absolutely delighted. I'm in the independent sector now. I had a great run, really enjoyed myself. I would not wish to be part of a legacy agency now. I'd much rather be the poacher, you know, nosing around in the grounds and nicking stuff. It feels brilliant being out here with you guys, I can tell you.
I think it's an interesting build on that, and I know Annabelle does a huge amount of work into this space and really understanding the relationship between client and agency, and she's been tracking throughout the COVID period what agencies have been doing to maintain their relationship with their clients, and the ones that have been doing a good job of it and the ones that haven't. And we also saw some evidence from another agency a few weeks ago that actually some of the groups have been pretty poor at this, partly because they've had to furlough a number of their team members, and partly because they don't have the same passion or sense of ownership over that relationship with the client. Most of the people we work with are entrepreneurs. They're passionate about what they do, and it goes back to the people question earlier on. They're managing those relationships to the most senior clients that they possibly can, engendering and developing long-term friendships, as you say, and that does pay dividends, particularly when things are really, really, really tight. Going to go back to a sort of technical question. We have seen obviously the emergence of consultants like yourselves here and on the new business side, and there's a real trend to basically outsourcing to consultancies to get an objective perspective on how we sell ourselves. What I want to understand basically from starting with Lucy and Katie and Adam, please chip in here, is what's the most desirable model? Because agencies are always reluctant to invest, as we know, whether it's training, whether it's people, whether it's business development themselves. It tends, like clients, to be the thing that gets cut the quickest in any downturn. Yet it's the very thing that we need to invest in if there's going to be any upturn. So what's a flexible and fair model for agencies and consultancies to work to? Lucy, can I start with you?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think that there's clearly the benefits of working, of outsourcing new business. There's quite a lot of benefits. Mainly, I think if you're in-house, you can often get sucked into working on other projects, and sometimes that pipeline generation and the activity that you need to be doing on a pretty much daily basis to keep that pipeline going, that often gets put to one side. But also when you work with a new business consultancy or you outsource it, we've got so much experience to work across every different type of agency, from independents to startups to global networks, across most disciplines and across every sector, both in the UK and UAE and US and Europe. And so we can kind of bring that experience to an agency. But what works best, I think, is when, I've got some really long-standing relationships with my clients, that go back 14, 15 years. And it's when we can work closely with perhaps an in-house marketing team. So we can guide them on what they should be doing in terms of marketing activity, in terms of content, PR, events. But then we dovetail that with the real proactive lead generation stuff. And then I think, new business always needs to be led from the top, from the CEO. And I've worked with some agencies where a CEO will hire a new business consultant or an in-house team and then just kind of leave them to get on with it. But actually, it needs to be driven really from the top as well. So that's the ideal situation, the ideal scenario, and the best working one that delivers the best results, I think.
Okay. And in terms of the actual financial model, Adam, what do you tend to, obviously there's the consulting bit, but if you get involved in basically helping clients through the cold calling bit or lead generation, do you have a different business model there? Is there a kind of a sort of a 50-50 win fee type of activity? How does it work?
What with us, or just generally? Obviously there's so many different models and markets out there. I would sort of, I echo what Lucy said there. I say, for me, I think the model that we preach is basically don't invest in a new business consultancy, invest in yourself. Do us out of a job. That's our model, to get in and get out. We don't want to work with you forever. We just want to fix you forever. It's about, leaders of businesses fully appreciating and understanding what it takes to be good at sales. And I think there's a real naivety and ignorance around the hard work that goes into sales, how much people need to look introspectively to sort out their positioning, to sort out a long-term strategy, the rigor and the process that needs to go into it every single day. And, you know, whereas you can outsource a certain element of this, you can't outsource new business entirely. You know, we're only here to hold the mirror up, you know, teach you things, show you the way. You know, unless agencies are willing to sort of meet us there and actually take on board those recommendations, you know, we can lead the horse to water, we can't make them drink. And that's the model that we see doesn't work, when people just go, I'll hire them, I'll hire him, I'll do that. Just don't, you know, call me when it's done, call me when the money's in the bank or the leads are on the table. That's when it all falls apart. But yeah, in terms of like the pricing model, yeah, I think, like, you know, I've seen people do sort of commission only sort of things for lead gen, which I don't necessarily think works. I think, but I do think commission in there is a sensible thing for both parties, because it ensures that you both have skin in the game. You know, it makes us work harder, and you know, and both come together, because there's more to win if both are successful. So I do think that there needs to be a bit between sort of, you know, fees and time cost, and then a sort of commission on things won. I think that's a healthy sales relationship to have. And yeah, I think, you know, we offer sort of both of those, but I think there's a few different models out there that people work to.
Okay. Well, look, I'd like to thank everybody, because we've remarkably come to the end of the hour. It has really gone very, very quickly, and I feel that we could probably talk for another hour on this, be longer. I'm also minded to suggest that we might do this again if there's enough interest in this, because I think it's a big subject, core to what we're all about, and I think it deserves more airtime. So please drop me a line and give some feedback as to whether you enjoyed today's session, whether you'd like me to arrange a further session, and who will also be interested in participating in talking. Obviously, I want to try and get as many of you airtime as possible so that you can all contribute. A couple of things for me to say, a couple of housekeeping things. We've got 15 events over the next week or so, sharing with the MAAG and also with the PRCA. That schedule of events will be published tomorrow, and urge you to share it with your team. Just for you guys and girls, it's also open to your teams, colleagues, so please share it with them. And I look forward to picking up with you next week again with a very interesting topic for you. I'll publish the detail of that over the next couple of days. But I'd like to say thank you very much to our panel, to our consultancies, and also to, in this case, our agencies representing. Steve, it's great to have you here. Pad, I'd like to spend more time with you both. And thank you for giving up your time this morning and sharing your stories. And have a good new business week, and I hope to see you all very soon. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys.
Bye,
Bye.
guys.